Well, pardon-happy President Biden is being urged by some to issue a full pardon of environmental and human rights lawyer Steven Donziger. Democratic Congressman Jim McGovern led 34 lawmakers in sending a letter to Biden on Wednesday, urging clemency, highlighting the irregularities in Donziger's case. For context, Donziger led a class action lawsuit against Chevron in the 1990s on behalf of indigenous Ecuadorian people, arguing that Chevron owned Texaco oil, which contaminated, according to him, the rainforest through its drilling activities. He secured a $9.5 billion judgment for the Ecuadorian people. Chevron did not pay that and instead retaliated against him. It led to his house arrest in 2019. He was released on April 5th, 2022.
Here to make the case for his own pardon is Steven Donziger himself. Welcome, Steven.
Hey, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Well, Steven, as you probably know, there's a long list of people who are trying to get their last-minute reprieve from President Biden. What makes this case different, and in what ways do you think that you are in a stronger position now to ask for a pardon?
Well, thank you for the question. I mean, I want to say at the outset, there are a lot of people worthy of pardons who've been in prison a really long time. And just because I'm seeking a pardon and advocating for one doesn't mean those other people should not get pardoned. So I want to urge the president to take a really broad view of what he should do now with his pardon power. He's pardoned 39 people last week after, of course, pardoning his son, Hunter. The people he pardoned last week were really safe cases. No one was in prison. People had been out of prison many of them have been out of prison for decades. So that's 39 people. He has 12,000 applications. I'm one of them. My case is different because I am the only person in U.S. history ever prosecuted privately by a corporation, in this case by Chevron, the oil company, which had a judge charge me with contempt of court for refusing to give my confidential case file to Chevron lawyers. And when I appealed that, the judge charged me with criminal contempt of court, and the prosecution was rejected by the Department of Justice, at which point the judge appointed a private law firm, a corporate law firm, with Chevron as a client to step into the shoes of the U.S. government and prosecute me directly. And it was this law firm, this Chevron law firm, that had me jailed. It's a very bizarre story, and it's a scary story. And it really affects not just me and my family in terms of my ability to make a living and to do my human rights work. It really affects every advocate for justice in this entire country, because we cannot have a country where private corporations get the power to actually criminally prosecute their critics and lock them up, which is what happened to me. So I think it's really important for President Biden to look at my case in its own category, because this is the kind of thing that makes our country look bad. It makes us hypocritical when our government argues in support of human rights abroad. I'll point out that 3 federal judges, including 2 from the Supreme Court, have ruled this case against me, this contempt case, was unconstitutional. On top of that, 5 international jurists from the United Nations, the Working Group on Arbitrary Detention, ruled that my detention was arbitrary and illegal and violates international law. All of these things put my case in a kind of a different category than every other case, and I think it's really important the president pardon me. However, I don't think I'm any special kind of candidate relative to people like Leonard Peltier and others who have literally spent decades in prison, some of whom are on the verge of dying and really should have their sentences commuted so they can get out. So I'm urging him to pardon me, to look at my case, and also to pardon other worthy candidates.
Yes, the pardon attention has certainly been on Hunter Biden getting a pardon, discussion of potential preemptive pardons for allies of Biden that they think are going to come under investigation by Trump. There were the commutations last week of a number of individuals who'd already been released and under house arrest because of COVID. Instead of just returning them to prison, they decided to let them go at that point. You were under house arrest for a period of time. You are not under house arrest anymore. Is that correct? So in your case, what you're looking for is recognition from the government, essentially, that it was wrong the way you were treated, because you're not currently going through any kind of punishment.
Just to be clear, I was found guilty by a judge in a non-jury trial of a misdemeanor contempt of court charge, which was prosecuted by Chevron. The max sentence for that charge is 6 months in prison, but I ended up serving over 4 times that amount in home detention and 6 weeks in prison for a crime that the Department of Justice refused to prosecute. So, yeah, I mean, I am seeking a full pardon. It's not going to give me back the time I lost with my job, my family, my clients in Ecuador. You know, it was almost 3 years of my life. I lost my liberty unfairly. And I did serve my entire sentence, so I can't get that back. But I think for various reasons, both so I can work, travel again, they still won't give me my passport. That is, Chevron won't give me my passport back so I can travel out of the country. And also, again, because of the symbolic nature of this very scary private corporate criminal prosecution, I think it's really critical that the president pardon me, even though I have already served my sentence in full. And it's important because he needs to send the message to our society and to the world that the United States is a rule of law country, is a country where a private corporation cannot, in violation of our Constitution and in violation of international law, um, criminally prosecute and jail somebody who holds them accountable for their abuses, as I helped the Amazon communities in Ecuador do in this landmark pollution case that we won way back in 2013. So Chevron's been on, harassing me and pursuing me, and I would argue even hunting me down for over 12 years now. I mean, this has been a real struggle for me and my family, but I want everyone to know we're okay, we're good. I'm continuing to do my human rights work out of the United States, and we're going to continue fighting until we can make it clear that this type of thing that Chevron pulled off with the support of a particular pocket of our federal judiciary is never going to happen again to anybody. You know, the climate movement really cares about this issue too. I have a tremendous amount of support. 50 NGOs sent President Biden a letter. Human rights groups in South Africa just sent President Biden a letter on my behalf. People are concerned about my case because they know if Chevron can get away with it with me, that other oil companies, other fossil fuel companies are going to use the same playbook against climate activists who are trying to protect our planet if they become a little too successful in holding these corporations accountable. So this case has wide implications. I need it for me to protect me and my family, but it's also needed by our society to protect the right to protest, to protect free speech, to protect the climate movement.
Do you think that the President Biden's support of the indigenous people, which has been vocal as well as in policy, as well as some of the tribal nations as well, is something that could help buoy your case? In addition to, you spoke a little bit about it, but that Chevron has had a outsized influence in attacking a lot of the social justice movement, a lot of the people who are protecting those who they have harmed. How do you see that playing out?
Well, I think you bring up an important point. I mean, the battle of the communities in Ecuador, the indigenous communities in Ecuador, and some farmer communities that I was involved in as a lawyer, there are other lawyers involved too, is really a critical battle, not only for fundamental justice, but for indigenous rights. I mean, the entire atrocity that Chevron committed by literally deliberately dumping billions of gallons of cancer-causing waste as a cost-saving mechanism into Ecuador's Amazon was really just a continuation of a trampling of indigenous rights in Ecuador and Latin America and really the entire world. I mean, indigenous peoples in Ecuador are on the front lines of climate protection. You know, they're in the Amazon rainforest trying to preserve it so we can live on a sustainable planet. So I also think it's important that President Biden understand the connection between a pardon for me and support for indigenous rights, not just in Ecuador, but also in the United States. You know, I've really become sensitized for being a non-native person in the United States to many of these issues in ways that I hadn't been before. And I just want to acknowledge that the frontline defenders of the planet are the indigenous peoples, are some of my clients down in Ecuador. And, you know, they're suffering right now. Many of them are getting cancer. They're being exposed to all sorts of contamination in their drinking water, in their rivers and streams. And it's really important they have their lawyer, you know, and depriving defenseless people of a lawyer who's worked on a case for 30 years and successfully prosecuted that case with a team of people to win a record-breaking pollution judgment that the world has never seen, to lock that person up and deprive the affected communities of adequate legal representation is in itself an abomination. And at a minimum, President Biden needs to send a signal to our society that this cannot happen, that this is wrong. It's illegal, and he needs to correct it. By the way, he's my court of last resort. I mean, even though 2 U.S. Supreme Court justices have backed me, the entire Supreme Court refused to accept my appeal for review. The two disagreed with that decision. They wanted to take the case and obviously reverse my conviction, but no one else wanted to take the case, I think largely because it was kind of considered too small a matter for a court that only deals with about 60 cases a year now. But that doesn't mean that what happened to me was not illegal. It was. And Justices Gorsuch and Kavanaugh, by the way, two gentlemen with whom I agree with on virtually nothing, agree with me on this issue. Like, this is super offensive to the rule of law, regardless of your politics. And by the way, that's why I was able to get such a broad group, ideological group of Democrats onto this letter. 34 congresspersons signed a letter to President Biden urging him to pardon me. If for no other reason, trust these people who vetted this issue. Their staffs vetted this issue. Jamie Raskin, Sheldon Whitehouse, probably two of the smartest lawyers in the Congress vetted this issue, and they're asking him to pardon me. So at a minimum, you don't have to like me. You don't have to agree with that, with the work I do to really hold Chevron accountable. But I think you must agree with the notion that private corporate prosecutions by an oil company, the jailing of a critic of an oil company by an oil company in the name of the U.S. government, that's wrong, regardless of your politics, and that's what needs to be corrected here.
Steven Donziger, thank you so much for joining us, and good luck.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.